Well, good afternoon, everyone. This webinar is resumes and cover letters being offered by the Membership and Professional Development Committee and the Workshops Committee of the Rare Books and Manuscript section of ACRL. My name is Sarah Cahalan. I'm the director of the Marion Library at the University of Dayton. We're happy to have you all joining us, especially our panelists here today. This is one of several webinars being offered in the RBMS Jobs and Hiring Workshop series. And upcoming sessions include mid-career changes on August 10th and under/overqualified, the question of more degrees on August 17th. And I'm going to try and put those registration links in the chat to everybody in case you're interested in attending those. The overarching goal for this series is to connect individuals in galleries, libraries, archives, museums, and special collections with other professionals who can share advice and experiences on different aspects of the job market and hiring practices in a variety of related professions. So RBMS membership is not required to attend any of these sessions. Before we jump in, I will share some logistics. The hashtag for this series is RBMS Jobs Hiring, which I will also put in the chat. The session is being recorded. The chat is not being recorded. A link of the video will be sent to everybody who registered. And during this event, we ask that you all adhere to the American Library Association's Statement of Appropriate Conduct. Pause while I copy and paste one more thing into the chat. I'm going to read a brief excerpt from it right now. The American Library Association is committed to providing a harassment-free environment for everyone, regardless of gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, disability, physical appearance, ethnicity, religion, or other group identity. Some behaviors, therefore, are specifically prohibited, including harassment or intimidation based on race, religion, language, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, disability, appearance, or other group status. Also sexual harassment or intimidation. Also yelling at or threatening speakers. So please abide by these guidelines. And if you encounter any issues, please get in touch with one of the hosts. That could be me or Lisa. Lisa, would you like to introduce yourself briefly here?
Sure. I'm Lisa Crucis. I've been involved with RBMS for quite a while, and I'm really excited to have been part of the planning committee to put this together. We've been very intentional in trying to get the breadth of the profession and the careers and skills that we're all trying to grow, develop, maybe take somewhere else for a little bit more money. So I'm really excited to be a part of this. Like I'm saying, this is your time. And so please do ask the questions that you want to. And frankly, and I am going to be the question monitor. So Sarah will get back to this, but I'll be managing those and making sure we keep time. So I'm glad to be here, and I'm really glad to be here with these fantastic panelists.
Yep, the program should run for about an hour total. We received numerous questions in advance of this session. So the questions we're going to start by posing the panelists are synthesized from those questions received in advance. The Q&A function will be available for attendees, and if time permits, I'll pose those questions to the panelists from the Q&A. In order to increase accessibility, we do have captioning enabled on this presentation. At the bottom of your screen, there should be an option to enable captions or to turn them off if you prefer. And I will briefly introduce our panelists before I get out of the way and let them share their wisdom with this group. They bring a wide array of experience to this topic from different areas of our interrelated fields. Tina Chan, she, her, is the Reference Services Program Manager and Humanities Librarian at MIT Libraries. She is also the Liaison Librarian to the Global Languages Department and the Writing Program. She enjoys mentoring library students and early career librarians. She is currently the coordinator-elect of the ALA Sustainability Roundtable, SustainRT. Kelly Forkenbrock, she, her, is the Public Services Librarian for North Liberty Library in North Liberty, Iowa. In addition to facilitating community engagement and training part-time staff, Kelly also hosts a monthly podcast and a weekly Facebook Live show on behalf of the library, both entitled Love, Light, and Lit. Her library was one of the round 1 recipients of ALA's Libraries Transforming Communities grants, helping the branch to launch a quarterly community conversation series, Lighthouse in the Library. And the next event is happening on Thursday, August 19th. Haley Moreno, she, her, is a database specialist for the WorldCat Metadata Quality Unit at OCLC. In her current role, she manages and enhances bibliographic and authority data. She has over a decade of cataloging and database maintenance experience in various types of organizations. Haley is an active member of library organizations such as the Online Audiovisual Catalogers and CORE, where she has served as an executive officer, co-chair, and committee member of several groups within those associations. Steph Knoll, they, them, is a special collections librarian at the University of Texas at San Antonio, where they manage the Special Collections Instruction Program and rare books collections. The most popular collection they manage is the Mexican Cookbook Collection, which holds more than 2,100 titles. They have worked in a variety of academic libraries, public and private, from doctoral granting universities to community colleges, and have served on search committees for other academic library positions. So we have 4 excellent speakers today. And as I mentioned, there's a wide variety of experience here, and I think time is just going to fly. So I'm going to jump right into question number 1 of the 4 we provided our panelists ahead of time. We'll take kind of a round robin approach where each panelist can offer some thoughts on each question. So the first question is, how do I write a cover letter that presents varied professional experiences and makes them relevant to the job that I'm applying for? And Steph, can you jump in on that one?
Sure. So I approach this from the perspective of someone who's new to the field, or maybe if you're like me, you bounce around librarian positions. So maybe you're not set on one type of librarian position, but I've got a new acronym for you, and it's ABTATS. So the image is someone with a sick tattoo on their abs, but it stands for always be thinking about transferable skills. So ABTATS. So in my case, I was thinking about it as someone who has customer service experience, has also done inventory work, has done web design, has done personnel management, technical writing. So these are all things that you can do in non-library jobs that are great to highlight when you are going after, especially an academic librarian job. So these are the kinds of things you want to highlight in your cover letter if you're coming from a different type of experience. And for me personally, before I got my first full-time academic library gig, I was working in a lot of offices and also as kind of a research assistant or a teaching assistant for various faculty. Most of my professional experience coming out of grad school was student work. So the kinds of jobs they give, that we give students. And so I leaned on a lot of the research and customer service experience that I had, which ultimately got me a reference job when I got out of school. I say got out of school, I mean 6 months after getting out of school. I don't want y'all to be too unrealistic. But also that reference experience then set me up for that, and also the volunteer experience I had set me up for a special collections position, which ended up being my first librarian position. So yeah, me on my resume, or on my cover letter and resume, I was emphasizing, like, I have worked in enacademic environments. I know how this is, and I've done a lot of research and customer service work. So it's possible to kind of take those skills and really help them, sell you on your cover letters.
Awesome, thank you. We're going to do like a round robin approach. So I'll throw it to Tina, and then Kelly and Haley.
Thanks, Sarah. Well, I think it's a good thing if you have different professional experiences, the experiences you learn, and it can be an asset that you should state in your cover letter. So for example, you can provide examples of what you learned from your prior experiences and how they relate to the job you're applying for. For example, if you worked in a customer service job and you're applying for a public services job, you can give an example of how you handle, let's say, a difficult customer, and then you can state in your cover letter, what you learned from that experience and how it applies to the public services job you're applying for. I would also say to read the job description and tailor the cover letter to the job. Even though your prior experience may not be in a gallery or a library or an archive or a museum, the skills you learn and the work that you did in those jobs are still transferable. And so, for example, if you worked with other people, it can demonstrate, your interpersonal skills. If you worked in a busy environment, it demonstrates, how you can work under pressure. So you want to remember to clearly state how your prior experiences relate to the job you're applying for. And in my experience, it was similar to Steph in that I had worked as a student worker at a library. And so that's how I got my job, my first job in an academic library, and I've been in an academic library since. When I was a student, I worked at the circulation desk, and I was also working as a research assistant at an academic library. And I was also a substitute reference librarian at a public library. And so, I had a little bit of academic and public, and then it turned out that, I got my first librarian job at an academic library. That's where I've been ever since. So I would say, it's good to have different experiences, but like Steph said, your skills are transferable, and make sure to highlight that in your cover letter.
Right. Hi, everyone. My name's Kelly, and with my personal experience, I have been working for 2 years as a librarian. I started as the library assistant 2 here at our library, and I've been in my current position for about 1.5 years. Before I entered the library industry, however, I'd spent 20 years in the private sector working jobs from marketing and sales to advertising to project management. So in my case, as someone entering the library industry with 20 years of professional experience under her belt, I found a way to align my needs with the needs of the library. Also, what helped for me was that I've already created kind of a reputation for myself professionally. So I was able to look into the library, and already being a patron of the library, to get insight into the library's immediate needs, especially when I started as a library assistant 2. For the 4 months that I was in that position, when the public services librarian position came up, I had already had 4 months at the library to kind of peep the culture, the needs, especially when it comes to community engagement. So I also used that when I applied internally for the position that I have now. I echo the sentiments of Steph and Tina before me. Definitely find a way to use language to align your experience with that requested from the job. That means looking at the job description letter for letter. Also, not using a blanket resume or cover letter or to address all of the libraries. Every library has a different need, and every library's role has a different function. So making sure that you understand the functions that are required from the job and then emulate that to connect directly with your experience is very helpful. So definitely review the job descriptions. If you have any insight into the library, whether you're currently working there and you're looking to get a promotion, or if you are a patron of the library already, or if you know people who are connected with the library, use those connections to get more expertise about the library and the position that they're hiring for. And just use those tools, I think, to really craft the perfect cover letter specifically for that position.
Hi, everyone. So similar to the other panelists, I would agree that, you'll be surprised that a lot of jobs that you might think are not transferable, the skills you learn from them to jobs in the library field, you can actually can apply them to whatever position, even cataloging, which is my particular specialty. Back when I was starting out, recent grad, I had a lot of retail experience. And through that retail experience, I learned how to work in teams. I learned how to problem solve. And with cataloging, you will have that situation where you're working with different departments, whether it's acquisitions, reference, interlibrary loan, and you need to learn how to communicate effectively with these different departments. So gaining that experience from retail, I was able to apply that to my first cover letter for like a real true cataloging position, and just providing experiences from that different background on how it aligns to the job that I was interested in. Problem solving is another thing. With cataloging, you will be dealing with all types of oddness that are going on in the catalog, and being able to effectively resolve them, how to assess a problem, and how to take the correct steps to resolve it is something that I was able to gain through working in retail. So just as others have said, look at that job description, think about your prior experiences, and there are just general skills that really do apply to most jobs, like supervision, problem solving, customer service. So definitely do not disregard some of the things that you have gained and learned from other jobs that are applicable to job positions in libraries.
I was just writing a comment to all and I realize it's my turn to speak again, but I agree. I love seeing retail experience sold in a cover letter. I think you can do it really well because there are so many connections, and especially when you have problematic patrons or problematic customers. Another thing I've liked to see, sometimes people can spin things like caretaking responsibilities in cover letters and resumes too. So the next question that we synthesized from attendees, and this time we'll go in a different order. We'll start with Tina, is how should I format my resume? It seems like a really easy question, but I think people have some strong opinions about this. So hopefully we can give people some thoughts.
Yeah, and I wish there was an easy answer to that. I would say it depends how much experience you have. I've been on search committees and I've read resumes that have been formatted differently. So I've seen a chronological resume. That's the most common kind of resume that I've seen, that lists the most recent work history at the top, and then it goes in reverse chronological order. And I've seen the education listed at the top of the resume for newer people in the field, and also where the education is listed at the end of the resume for people who have many years of experience. I would say a chronological resume lets the search committee see your career progression. And then that the advantage of a chronological is that, if you have the career progression, and you don't have any long gaps in between jobs, and you have done some accomplishments in the field, but you may not have these things, and that's okay. I've also seen a functional resume, which focuses on your relevant skills rather than on your work history. So I've seen resumes with a section called relevant skills, which replaces the work experience. And then the skills section, they're grouped under categories instead of job titles. So for example, you could have a skill called customer service, and then there's another skill called outreach. So those would be relevant if you're applying for a public services position. So I think, and then below that is like a brief work history and your education. I've also seen a combination resume that's not, I haven't seen those as commonly as the other two, but I have seen them. So it combines, it's a mix of the chronological and the functional. And so the combination, it focuses on your skills, like a functional resume does, but it also, you have space to focus on your work history, like in a reverse chronological order. So I think a combination resume is good if you have transferable skills, and then it gives you details of your work history. So I would say how your resume is formatted depends on your work experience, how much work experience you have. whichever kind of resume you select, you want to highlight your strengths on your resume. So you want to match your strengths to the job description. And we talked about the skills earlier. So each resume has its strengths. So you just want to determine which kind of resume matches what you want to highlight. And I know that's not it's not an easy answer. So it's not like a straight black and white answer, but I would say it depends.
So with resumes, I'm pretty old school about resumes. As I mentioned before, I spent 20 years in the private sector. Half of that time I was with one employer. So leaving that employer and then venturing into the library industry, I had to really revamp my resume from there. So, but I believe in keeping a very straightforward, chronological approach with resumes. Your objective statement, your experience, your education, and your references. Very old school. However, if you want to be a little creative, some things that you can do is, if you have like a header at the top, a colorful header at the top, maybe align it with the colors of the library. That could be, I think that's kind of a subconscious way to already, because you want to go into your interview, showing the employer that you are an asset to the organization. And what better way to introduce yourself than to align yourself visually with the organization? So if you feel the need to go beyond the grain and beyond the traditional format of the resume, and you want to include some kind of color or a color pop in your resume, I would suggest sticking with colors that match the logo of the library you're using. Also, I saw someone mention language here in the chat. Language is very important. You want to keep it concise. Part of my job as public services librarian is to help hire out for our part-time staff. And while we use an electronic form for applicant submissions, we do every once in a while get a PDF of a resume. And I find that the ones that I'm most willing to look at are those that are aligning with the job, that it's not a general resume, that it's not the general objective, like to be a better servant for your organization. Well, how do I know you're not saying that to me and a dozen other employers? So just like with the cover letter, as I mentioned, specializing and customizing your resume to fit the needs of the library that you're applying to is of crucial importance. But for format, for me, I'm very plain Jane, very old school. Chronological format is what I would suggest. But if you want to add colors, do the library a solid and match their colors from their logo. It could make a good impression.
Yeah, and I would add that, like Tina had mentioned, it really depends. And unfortunately, you can ask different individuals in the field, how should I format my resume or my CV? And you will always tend to get different responses. So there's really not going to be like, this is the gold standard when it comes to resume or CV creations. But as others had mentioned, make sure you customize, make sure that, again, you're looking at that job description and you're hitting all the skills that the job is requiring or is looking for in a person. I personally, for myself, I tend to make sure that my font is not too small. You don't want people to be having to look very closely at your resume and not being able to read it clearly. You want to have white space. You don't want to have it too cluttered. And it's okay. I mean, I personally have more experience with CV because I tend to have been an academic and even nonprofit organizations like OCLC, where I currently work. I still submitted a CV, and the employer will let you know if they want a resume or a CV, or if they're not making it clear, make sure to reach out to them and get that clarification, because you will modify based on what they're asking for, right? So make sure you have white space, not too cluttered, a good enough font. If you go over a page, I would say that's better than trying to fit everything in one single page. Also, make sure that I have done a mix approach. Actually, because I have many years in the field. And as you have worked in the field, you start gaining more experience, especially if you have gone through different libraries or different employers. So it starts getting bigger and bigger. So make sure to just like customize, don't get it too cluttered, try to make things concise. I actually do chronological, so my recent positions with all the past positions that are relevant to library fields. Like when I started, I didn't have that relevant librarian experience, but I had other experience and I made sure to include that. But now I'm in a point in my life and my career that those jobs are no longer needed to be listed because I have been able to gain that library experience that aligns with what I may be looking for. So chronological, and then I do actually areas. So for cataloging, you know, sometimes it's good to quantify, like how many resources have you worked on? Maybe formats, have you done serials? Have you done special collections? How about audio visual? So quantifying, also adding that to your resume or CV will look good for they can see like, oh, this person actually has done the work. So I would say like those are just some of the touch points I would do for my resume or CV.
Yeah, I'm so glad that Haley brought up CVs because yeah, in academia, you definitely want to have like a base resume and CV where you're putting like the CV is where you put everything. It's where you put, you know, your professional positions, but it's also where you've put your publications and your presentations. So if you have that experience, then you want to go ahead and start building your CV. But yeah, so you want to have that base document, and then, you know, the work that you have to put in for each position that you're applying for is making sure that you're matching your experience to that position, because you're making a case that you are, you know, their ideal candidate. So if you are formatting just, you know, your resume, I have previously actually, you know, early on in my career, I put relevant experience first, and then I had additional work experience below that, just so that, you know, all the gaps were filled in my relevant experience. But I also am a millennial and I've been part of the gig economy. So I've been in positions where I've been working 3 jobs at the same time, and I don't necessarily have to put all 3 of them on there. They don't, pizza delivery experience, maybe not as relevant as managing an office or, you know, being a student assistant in government documents. So yeah, you know, if you are just getting into the field, or if you're just getting into something, you know, and into a new area of librarianship, you know, tailor it however makes sense to you. But also you have to keep in mind that you're also tailoring it for each job, because ATS, applicant tracking systems, are a real thing. So if they're using customers and you're using patrons on your accounts, you want to swap those out. And if you're doing a Control F on your resume or your CV, you want to make sure that you do a read through before you submit it, because you never know, it's going to pick up strange things if you know, replace all. And yeah, so definitely a read through before you drop it off. But yeah, the relevant sections for resumes are going to be like your information, your professional experience, your education. Actually is a lot of people put that up first, education, and then professional experience and skills that you've picked up. So what, you know, library management systems have you worked with? What, you know, are you good on the Microsoft Office suite? Are you good on, you know, various cataloging languages? You know, whatever experience you've picked up that you think is going to, you know, fit in as a skill set that you need for this job, good to have a section for that at the bottom. And also, I generally have volunteer experience, or how did I phrase it on my resume? It's not professional development, but it's you know, it's dedication to the profession. So these are, you know, volunteer positions I've held. I also will include service. There we go, professional service. I got there. So yeah.
Kind of going back to what you mentioned, applicant tracking systems. I'm sure some of you, hopefully a lot of you have had experience on search committees, and that's whether it's a hiring manager or search committee, that's like the invisible back of the house. Like we have no control over that. So anybody that's been in that power role, could you speak to, how do you get past that screening, right? So at many universities, you submit the application, HR does a run through to make sure that, you actually do know Iliad or that you mentioned it. So do you have any advice on that from the hiring perspective and selection? Like, how do I get to your eyes?
Yeah, so I think making sure that you're matching up your language with the language of the job that you're trying to get. So, and especially if you're new to the field, this is a really good way to kind of build up your vocabulary as well. So if they refer to it in a totally different way than however you learned in school, go with their way, because that's how they're presenting it. I don't know if anybody else wanted to jump in on that.
I would just add that, the whole screening process, just making sure that your cover letter and your resume, besides, hitting those key terms, making sure you're presenting your experience well, but also in the cover letter, you can present, you also have researched and learned about the organization that you want to be employed by. So making sure that cover letter, a lot of people think that maybe it's just about you, but really you should think, at least my approach has always been like, think about your relationship with this organization and what can you bring into the table for whatever future direction or maybe strategic initiatives or its core values. Like, how can you align yourself with them? And that way they can see that you would be a good fit for this organization. You being part of that job can help accomplish certain things that maybe they need to accomplish. So I think if you add those elements, HR will be passing on your resume to whatever hiring committee, because they're seeing like this person, besides having the skills, they also took the time to research this organization and really get to know what we're all about. And they have aligned themselves with the values that we have in this organization.
Thank you. That's a really great point, because you're selling yourself, definitely your experience, but you're definitely selling, hey, I'm the right person to be in that role because I'm going to move you, like Steph said, towards that mission and vision. So thank you for adding that.
Yeah, agreed 100% about looking at a strategic plan if there is one posted on the website for the institution. Well, maybe we could move on to the next question, which is related but slightly different. It's, should I have a LinkedIn profile or a professional website built alongside my resume or CV? How important is it to have that online presence of my professional experience? And for this one, could we start with Kelly, please?
Sure. So I know the verdict's out on whether or not LinkedIn is helpful. The opinions vary. I will say that LinkedIn is one of the reasons why I'm in the library business or in the library industry today. When I dusted off my resume and cover letter, I started my job search from scratch, and part of that was using LinkedIn. And I had already built 20 years of connections on that platform, even though I hadn't used it on a regular basis in years. But once I was on there, I was able to say right out loud to all of my peers, and that means all of my followers, former colleagues, friends, former classmates, hey, I'm looking for work. And LinkedIn has a great feature where you can check on your profile if you're open for jobs. Now, the good and the bad thing about that is, the bad thing is then you'll have like life insurance people DMing you constantly to offer you jobs, which you can kindly ignore if that's not what you're looking for. But the great thing is that now your colleagues know, oh, you're looking for work, because sometimes you're not able to announce on regular social media that you're looking for work because you are either still employed somewhere else, or you just don't want it out there like that. So LinkedIn provides that professional social media environment where you can say, hey, I'm looking for work. And when I made that announcement and made my profile open to jobs, one of my colleagues actually reached out to me and connected me with the library director. I worked at 2 libraries. I started a part-time job here at North Liberty, but I was also working at Coralville Public Library, which is about 5 minutes down the road. And that person was friends with the assistant director at Coralville Public Library. And she put in a good word for me because I had worked with her for 10 years prior at our former employer. So it's really organic. If you work LinkedIn, it can work for you. That's my best advice about LinkedIn. So don't be afraid to use LinkedIn. It's just another platform to show that you are working, and you will be surprised at who's paying attention, because the person who connected me with the assistant director, I think I worked with her one-on-one maybe 4 times in the 10 years I was there. But because I was in her network and she saw I was hiring, she connected me with her friend, who then opened up the doors for me to apply for a part-time position. So LinkedIn can be useful. As far as websites are concerned, I tend to think that I think it's optional, but if you are applying for a technical librarian position, a website could be helpful to show your skills. That can always be helpful to say, include that on your resume and say, especially if you're applying for a technical position, I think a website, having your website up would be very, very helpful. So I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. I continue to use it as a professional. In my position as a host of a podcast, I've gained several podcast guests and connected with several professionals through LinkedIn. So it's been very helpful for me. But like any other platform, it works if you work it.
Following up on that question, and maybe one of the other panelists could speak to this. You just mentioned it. You worked with somebody 4 times in the span of 10 years. And I think librarians, we have that personality where we have a little bit of shyness and we undercut ourselves. But speaking to what you said, that relationship, that conversation you had with somebody at that RBMS conference where you really showed that you were passionate about working with students, that might get you a job 6 years later. So does anybody else feel comfortable talking about that sense of imposter syndrome? Like, how do you get the courage to reach out to that person and say, hey, do you remember me? Haley, maybe you.
Well, I think what's nice about LinkedIn and other platforms, if you are using it, like I have a Twitter account, have a LinkedIn account. My Twitter account is mainly for professional stuff. I really don't post anything personal. And what's great is that if others in the profession see how active you are, how engaged you are maybe in LinkedIn, what's really cool is also you can post content, like you could post presentations. You can also get endorsement from colleagues in the field that know you and can say like, oh, Haley has cataloging experience. I know her cataloging and I want to endorse her for that, right? So you can get endorsements. You can even get folks leaving recommendations about working with you and their experience. These are things that you cannot say in a resume or in a CV in a way. So it's a nice supplement, just like a personal website where you can present your content. Like you talk, you list your presentations maybe in your CV, but you can actually show the slide deck of your CD, or maybe there's a recording of you giving some sort of presentation, and an employer can see that. It's like, oh, I saw your presentation, I thought it was very engaging, and I can even start a conversation, right? So the whole shyness thing, and I know because I'm an introvert, I'm a cataloger, so that's no surprise, but I really don't think like you're showboating or anything. It's really you're presenting yourself and your professional knowledge and you're sharing it. Sometimes you can have these very interesting conversations through these through LinkedIn or maybe Twitter, these discussions about issues that are really occurring in your field, and you can gain connections. And you never know, like if if you start having and building these relationships through these social media platforms, an opportunity could arise in a couple of years. So don't lose touch, you know, like these social media sites, yeah, they have their good and their bad, but one of the good things is you connect with people that you might have never thought that you'll connect with, and you can actually like share your knowledge, learn and gain knowledge from others. So I definitely see it as a positive. I'm not as active as I wish I would be, but still I do look at conversations and I do sometimes participate in online discussions on cataloging issues. So it's just really good tools to use to connect with people. And again, always think in the back of your head, you never know, maybe that professional relationship could end up being a future colleague or a future employer. So definitely be open-minded and start little by little. Hey, you don't have to go rush and put everything all at once, you know, and especially when you're starting out, it's a slow thing, you know, little by little, you'll do a presentation here, or you'll do some sort of practicum over there, and making sure that you have another place where you can show yourself. And maybe, you know, and employers are all over LinkedIn and Twitter, like everyone has a account. So, you know, there also can be searching through these sites, and it's an opportunity for you to also be present in another venue to hopefully get a future job.
The thing I will add before I throw it back to Sarah, so we can get to that final lap of our wonderful conversation today. Some of us are still in school and we're here and it's like, hey, I still haven't made that really amazing tutorial. I was really fortunate in my grad school experience that somebody said, hey, present at a regional conference. Not that many students are brave enough to do it. So, you know, depending on what your community is and your confidence, you know, SAA, they have a research forum. Turn in a paper. Maybe you don't get selected, but people are becoming familiar with your name. That's getting you some of that visibility. And yeah, somebody might stop to look at your poster that you really just pushed together because it was your capstone project, that you don't really have time. And that might show somebody, look, this person's starting to, they're looking at innovation. Like, you know, Haley's looking at linked data still as a student. So that's what I would just mention is you can do something while you're in school, and nobody applies for those scholarships. So you might actually get some money to do that. Okay. So back to you, Sarah.
I did want to leave a little time for Steph or Tina to weigh in on LinkedIn and professional websites. I know sometimes it feels like, oh, just one more thing we have to maintain, but it does sound like there are some benefits.
So going to me. So for me personally, I've kept up my LinkedIn. I started it as a grad student so that, you know, I had a place to put everything that was online. I wasn't going to be, you know, a web resources librarian or anything, so I didn't feel like, you know, I needed to make my own website. I was fine just putting everything in LinkedIn. And it was, and you know, I didn't have the experience to, you know, have something that a professional librarian would be expected to have. So, or at least I thought, because again, we're overcoming imposter syndrome here. So yeah, I maxed out every class that I could put in. I included projects that I worked on for faculty. So like, you know, crunching the data on library schools and who's offering comic book classes and things like that. You know, so these projects that I was working on as a student worker for faculty or in offices that I could put online. And then my geeky self, my dork of a person, made up business cards, and it was a link I could include on my business cards because I wasn't working anywhere. I was unemployed for 6 months out of grad school, so that was something I could put on a business card and say, hey, you can look at my experience and everything here. So it was really useful for me. And then throughout my career, it's been useful to maintain professional contacts. So I'm in a a conference session, and I'm really into what this person's talking about, they will generally have a LinkedIn or a Twitter. So it's also a great way to kind of build up your professional contacts. And also when you leave jobs, it's a great way to kind of keep track of your coworkers, your colleagues at previous jobs and see what they're up to. So I found it very beneficial. I'm not the most active LinkedIn user, but I do use it on a regular basis, and I've found it to be very useful.
Yeah, and I also have a LinkedIn profile, and I signed up when I was a library school student. And like Lisa said, it's another platform that you have to sign up for. But then my brother encouraged me to create a LinkedIn account, and he was telling me about the benefits and how you can connect professionally with people in your field. But he's also an HR recruiter, so that's why I signed up, and I'm glad I did, because I found there were people, because I was a library school student at the time. I didn't know, how should I network, and so then I did connect with some people. There's a way that you can connect online with LinkedIn, and that you can meet people online and just do an informational interview. And there was actually somebody who had connected with me, who I met them at a conference before. And then I guess they found me because like where I was working at the time, or I used to work there, and then they wanted to reach out to me because they said, they met me at a conference, and I see that you used to work here. Can we meet to talk about what the work environment is like? And so I was happy to meet with them. So it was a two-way street where I had used LinkedIn to connect to people, and then people had used it to connect with me. And so I'm always open to connecting with people. And I would also say there is a way, like Haley said, that you can add your presentations. It's not just like listing your work experience, but there is a way to add your presentations or any online portfolios that you may have, or if you have any class projects that you've worked on, you can list it there. There's also a way to get recommendations, like people can write recommendations for you, and you can write recommendations for them. And there's also, you can add keywords for your skills too, so that people know what your skills are, and that you can endorse people, who have those skills. So I would say that LinkedIn, to use LinkedIn as a supplement to your resume.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So we did give all of the panelists a chance to think ahead of time about any piece or pieces of advice for job applicants that they would want to provide regarding resumes and cover letters. So this could be general, or it could be really specific. And for this one, we'll kick it off with Haley, please.
So I would say that there is not one perfect way to format your resume or CV or your cover letter. Do not get discouraged if you don't get a call back or anything. It's just the way it goes. I know that feeling. We all do. We were not always accepted for every job we applied for, but definitely take your time, be intentional. Do not rush it. It's been repeated several times during this panel that you should really think about customizing. Don't reuse your CV or your cover letter, and taking your time and really researching that organization you're hoping to work for is really important, because you want to stand out. Remember that these hiring committees, there's a bunch of people applying for the same job. So you really need to think about, how can I stand out, and how can I make their life easier by making sure that I'm hitting all the points, all those skills that they want to see from me. Like, how can I address that in my cover letter, and how can I make sure that I address that in my CV? So be very intentional, take your time, be patient, and do not get discouraged, because unfortunately that's just the way any industry goes. It's always a tough market, but you keep going, and as time progresses and you get more practice, it starts actually feeling a little bit better. Like, it's never, at least for me myself, I always dreaded having to do this type of stuff. But as you gain more practice and you learn more and you go through job descriptions, you start seeing patterns and you yourself become better at writing these and just being more effective and knowing better approaches on how to target a job and how to make sure that you present yourself in the best light to make sure that hiring committee wants to reach out and give you a call.
Just building off of what Haley said, going back to that imposter syndrome, save your cover letters. You might not get that job, but you probably said something really nice about your quality of work, a project. Again, customize, but that's a more sustainable way of, doing more with less work. And then the second thing I would say that you mentioned is really fantastic is, well, I just lost it, but we'll come back to that. Back to the popcorn art of our amazing panelists.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go for it, Steph.
So for me, I think the way that I'm thinking of this is there's kind of the overall advice for job searching, but also the advice for individual applications. So kind of one of the biggest pieces of overall advice I would have is have that list of specific examples of things you've worked on. Just have that on deck, because you're going to need it for your cover letters, you're going to need it for interviews, and you want to be able to answer off the cuff about something specific you've done, and especially if it's something you're proud of, because that comes through. It so comes through if you worked on something that you were really excited about, and that adds to your interview experience, because hiring committees like to see people who are excited about the work. And then on the kind of individual application front, having that checklist of like, okay, I found the job ad, I need to look at their website, I need to make sure that I'm matching the language of the job ad with my cover letter and my resume or my CV, whichever you're using. So getting that checklist together, kind of coming up with a system for your applications will make the work easier on you. For me, like I said, I was looking for a job for 6 months out of grad school. So that was my job, was looking for a job. I volunteered places, but most of the work that I did was looking for a job. So as much as you can systematize that and, have that checklist that you're checking off for each job ad, and you're still putting in the work of making sure that you're tailoring your applications to each job, it'll make things easier on you.
And I would add that in addition to customizing the cover letter to the position, that search committees can tell when they're reading your cover letter whether it's a stock cover letter. So that's why if they can tell, I mean, if you know it, then they probably know it too. So they can kind of tell because they've been where you are. And so you want to stand out. So you want to customize it, read the job description, highlight your strengths, explain how you meet the qualifications, so that your cover letter and resume match the job description. I would also say to be prepared in if you do get the in-person interview or in the initial Zoom interview or phone interview, to make sure that that you have, like Steph was saying, that whatever projects you have, you want to make sure that they may ask you some questions that are out of left field. So they may ask you difficult questions. So you have to think about that, like, what did you learn kind of questions, what would you have done differently, those kind of questions. So I would, and also prepare yourself with kinds of interview questions that you may get. What are some commonly asked interview questions?
Yep, just to echo everyone else about customization of both the resume and especially the cover letter. As Tina just mentioned, we can, speaking as someone who has been part of a hiring committee and I continue to work with hiring, we can definitely tell if it's a stock cover letter. But I would also add, that follow the submission directions to the T. If the submission directions are for you to apply via an online form, apply via the online form. It will only prolong your job search if you decide to send the resume instead of doing as the submission guidelines request. So make sure that you're following the submission guidelines to a T, that you're adhering to deadlines and submission dates, all of that. And then my second tip, if you are able to do this, if you have the investment to do so, I would say find a way to put your cover letter as a PDF on a QR code and create some business cards for yourself and do some networking. Stop by, there's chambers of commerce, your local chamber of commerce, local libraries themselves, drop off your business card. It really makes a great impression to have a business card to show that you are open for hire. Business cards, I think you can go from Vistaprint, you can get 500 business cards for like $10. Or if you go to your local print place, and you can get them for a very low investment. But it's a great way, especially if you're applying for a technical job, but just in general, to have your resume available, because you never know who you're going to run into when you're job searching, because job searching happens beyond your computer screen. It happens in libraries. It happens at networking events. It happens at social hours. Job searching, as I think one of the panelists just said, is a full-time job. So make sure that you have something that you can give handy. A business card with a QR code is an example where you can promote yourself. So that's my last advice. And I think all the other advice here has been stellar. So thank you.
Thank you all for answering all that. We've got some fabulous questions in the Q&A. We're running towards that finish line. So I'm going to ask one more question. Our panelists are fantastic. This session will be recorded. Sarah will tell you a little bit more of that when we close up. So one question, and whoever wants to jump in, how do you open that first sentence in the cover letter? How do you, sell yourself or get them to keep reading without sounding too desperate? And I know we've all been there. So whoever can speak to that, what does that first paragraph look like for you?
One thing that I think is helpful is a good opener is, I saw on your website that you're hiring for XYZ position. I saw on your website that you're hiring for library assistant position. I think that's a great opener because it shows that you didn't just bump into them on Career Builder. And maybe if you did, so what? Because what should be being done at that point is you see the job on a job search engine, and then you're going to the website, and then take the time to take a look at their website. So I think that's a great opener because it shows that you have specific interest in the library you're applying for because you went and visited their website.
I think we might have to leave it at that, but this has been awesome. I'm so grateful to our panelists and to everybody who joined us today. I mean, just so many great examples. I'm glad that this is being recorded so that people can refer back to it, even if they're not searching for a job right now. I just really appreciate the value of kind of demystifying a little bit what can be kind of a confusing process. So hopefully that opens some doors and empowers some people to get some jobs. So I'll just say thank you so much to Steph, Tina, Kelly, and Haley, and to Lisa. And thank you to ACRL, especially Elois Sharp. And thanks to the whole planning group that's pulled this webinar and then the next two webinars together. I put those links in the chat. Thanks to everyone for making time to listen to this, either this afternoon or via recording. And I'd say if you like this one, check out those upcoming webinars. I think there'll probably be some more good stuff there. And I think closing in on 2:59, I'll probably stop the recording and give everyone a virtual round of applause. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And next session, August 10th. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.